welcome to another Sista Shanice show live on YouTube. We are indeed honored. It is an absolute pleasure to have your company. If you are not already a subscriber to this channel, what are you waiting for? Please do subscribe. It would be an absolute privilege and an absolute honor to have you on board. And if you're wondering what this is on my right, this is my lady's book. Yes, please do go ahead and get a copy of the book. The Remarkable Accomplishments of Ancient African Civilization. Some of you are going to say, you know, what accomplishments? You know, what have we achieved in ancient times? If that is you, or if you've got any young people who have no idea of what we have accomplished in times of old, you need to get them a copy of this book, okay? It's an incredible handbook. And by the time they've read it, they'll be feeling 10 feet tall. They will be so, so proud to be an African. And that's what the book is designed to do, make our young people feel proud to be an African, to elevate them, you know, above the really derogatory daily kind of battering that they get in the education system, okay? We can't expect the education system to tell us about how great we were and therefore how great we are. We've got to do that for ourselves. Good news, family. I've got a special guest behind the scenes that I'm going to be bringing forward to meet you now. He is our brother, Kwame Osei. I'm just admitting him from the waiting room. And yeah, family, just please do get a copy of the link and share it. The thing about using Zoom is that I don't actually get the link until we go live. And so, you know, I'm unable to share our link beforehand. But, you know, the link is now available. Please do share it. As you can see, we've got our beloved brother Kwame Osei in the background there. Welcome, welcome, brother Kwame. How you doing? Take yourself off mute. We want to hear your voice.
I'm very, very well, my sister, and greetings to all the viewers and subscribers to the show. Look forward to a great conversation and great discussion about the subject matter in hand.
Oh, we are too, indeed. You know, family, we've been running a new series, and I'm probably going to do a few more shows on this topic. And it's about life in Britain, being Black and living in Britain. What is it like? We have viewers, listeners from all around the world, and some of you have probably never visited the UK before. And I know until recently, most of you didn't even know that there were Africans in Britain because they do such a great job of hiding us, you know, when they've got their cameras out, you know. So if there's a few Black people around, they'll cut us out, you know, to give the impression that UK is all white. But it ain't all white. There are millions of us here. And we have a story to tell, you know, our parents who came here before us and those before them, they all had their stories, and we have our stories as well. Brother Kwame is going to be sharing his story and his experience of life in Britain in a short while. Before that, we'll have a little bit of a conversation about some current affairs matters in particular. We're going to talk a bit about the fact that Italy, little old Italy, summoned, you know, African nations to a summit, and at least 20 nations went running. What was that all about? We're going to talk about that in a very short while. So family, as you come through the door, please do give us a thumbs up, and also let us know that you're in the house by telling us that you are. Drop us a message in the chat, okay? I want to see your messages in the chat. Now, I'm going to introduce Brother Kwame because I want him to open up a little bit of a conversation for us today. And while he's doing that, I am going to be posting behind the scenes the link for today's show. So welcome, welcome, Brother Kwame. Brother Kwame, he's a regular caller on the Big G Galaxy Alfiri, the only de-brainwashing station. He's a man that comes with facts. He's a man that comes with information. Why? Because he's a historian, he's a writer, he's a social commentator, he's a podcaster, and he's also a business person. And he's been researching and studying African history for nearly 25 years. And he's been on study tours to Egypt, India, Australia. He's been analyzing the African origins of these countries. And his thesis is on the African genocide, Mangamese, the so-called transatlantic slave trade, which, you know, he appropriately calls the Mangamese, which looked, amongst other things, into about how Britain became vastly wealthy on the backs of buying and selling us as Africans and trafficking African children around the world, their plantations. And, you know, he's looking at the connection between Ghana and Jamaica. And it was just earlier today, actually, that I was talking about the Maroons and Nanny of the Maroons, who said, you know, said to be, was a queen in the Ashanti Kingdom, who got kidnapped and brought to Jamaica, along with about 4 of her brothers. And they set up, you know, 5 separate maroon colonies in Jamaica. And they brought with them some war tactics, because her brothers and they were war strategists. And I was talking about how they would lure the British into their traps, and they would use a bush tactic that I noticed also exists amongst the Mandinkas in the Gambia. And so it's a really interesting connection there, but maybe Brother Kwame can say a little bit about that for us in just a minute. And yeah, he done his presentations at Nottingham University in Leicester, De Montfort University, and in Ghana at the University of Ghana. He's written more than 200 articles for the likes of Black Britain, New Nation magazine, BBC, IMF and World Bank, and in Ghana, the Daily Graphic, Ghanaian Times, Public Agenda, and is a columnist on the modernghana.com. He's also the content creator and producer for the podcast Ghana Africa in Focus, which has become one of the most popular podcasts in Ghana. The podcast features hot issues in Ghana, as well as advice on buying land, buying property in Ghana, and as well as business and investment opportunities in the country. The podcast also features critical issues affecting the African continent. Kwame also provides a consultancy service for those wishing to do business, invest, as well as buying land and property in Ghana. All of this he does in the spirit of Ma'at and in the spirit of brotherhood. We are delighted to have Brother Kwame in the house. Brother Kwame, welcome, welcome. What a formidable amount of experience you have. So we're delighted to have you join us today.
I'm grateful and thankful to the Most High for the invite, my sister.
It's an honor. I know how busy you are, so it's an absolute honor that you were able to take the time out. So, my brother, one of your areas of interest, you said, is looking at the connection between Ghana and Jamaica. Yeah. You know, let me allow you to just say, share with our audience maybe what some of your findings has been so far. Hundreds of
so part of my thesis that I did in Ghana 2010 was to look at the connection between, you know, Ghana, Jamaica, and obviously the UK. And you know, there is a large sort of body of evidence out there that links Ghana to Jamaica. So, for example, Ghana was the center of the genocide, Mangamese, for more than 250 years. So if you look at where Ghana is today, situated right in the west coast of Africa, you will see that of the captivity forts, so-called slave forts, that go from Senegambia all the way to Rwanda and Angola. There's about 70 of them. Half of those are in Ghana. So you got Amina, you got Sekondi, you got Christian Borg, you got Osu. Half of those are in Ghana. So that sort of states that a lot of the activity, or a lot of the Africans were taken from the continent to the so-called New World were actually taken from what we call Ghana today. Back then, Ghana was called the Gold Coast. So, I wanted to make that link between Ghana and also, the Caribbean, specific Jamaica. So I went to Jamaica, and, shockingly enough, or not shockingly enough, there are many similarities between Ghana and Jamaica. So, for example, parts of the food, for example, in Ghana we have we have something we call rice and peas. Sorry, wachi. So wachi is basically black eyed beans and rice, and in Jamaica it's rice and peas. So that's the connection. That's the connection there. In Ghana we have something that we call in kuntumbre, which is basically spinach. In Jamaica it's kalaloo. Then also we have the green banana that we call apim in tree. The Jamaicans call it green banana. So there's the culinary thing there. Also, there's interesting festivals. So in Jamaica, there's a festival called John Canoe. Now, John Canoe is actually from Fante area in the coastal line of Ghana. And he was taken, John Canoe was one who was taken, those Ghanaians were taken from Ghana to Jamaica in particular. And that John Canoe festival evolved to become the festival that is in Jamaica. And that comes from Ghana, John Canoe. So that was quite interesting to find that connection. And also even some of the language. So what we call Jamaican patois is actually an amalgamation of different languages, particularly from the west coast of Africa. So for example, typical, couple of Jamaican, words, nyam, Nyam. That's basically a Wolof word, but Jamaicans call nyam to eat. So if Jamaicans say I'm yamming something, basically I'm eating something. But that's the Wolof word, Nyam. If you add an E on it, Nyame, that's the Akan word for the Most High, Nyame,
Yes.
And then you got Dokono, we have that in Ghana. Jamaicans have that too, Dokono, like cornmeal, and even Obia, that's Jamaicans say Obia being like witchcraft, and that also comes from the Akan word, Obia, which means like it has origin in terms of the witchcraft as well, but it signifies the similarities of how language is used, and also the sort of phrases that are used in Jamaica. So Jamaicans say "misse," right? "Misse," right? We say "I can misse." So that's again the linguistic connection between Ghana, particularly Ghana, and Jamaica. So I found that quite interesting as well. And then also we went to Negril, and we went to Montego Bay, and went to Kingston. We took some DNA samples of the people that are there. And we took it back to Legon, University of Legon in Ghana. And we were able to, as a result of those blood tests that we took, conclude that those Jamaicans are actually from Ghana. We're taken from Ghana. So
what percentage of the samples that you took were from Ghana?
It's about 40%, 50%.
Oh.
So that signifies that, the large Jamaicans who live in Jamaica, quite a few of them would have originated from Ghana.
Oh, wow. Fantastic piece of research work there and findings. Most interested. And yes, I think almost all Jamaicans, I think, must know by now, because, our history has been so distorted. Our history has been rewritten and from a Eurocentric perspective, and all sorts have been put into our history. And despite the efforts, of the centuries to divide us as Jamaicans from our roots in Africa, we're making the connections, and our brothers just, made some cultural connections, some linguistic connections, and obviously, there's all the documentation as well, and there's the folklore and the stories of greats like
for example, even for example, in the Akan or authentic culture, we have what we call Kwekwe Nancy, which is the Nancy stories. In Jamaica, they have the very same thing, but that tells the origin of that from Akan in Ghana. The Kwekwe Nancy stories that Jamaicans also tell their children. They're saying that we also, the Akan and particularly the Asante, tell their children as well. So it's showing you even there's that cultural bonding together in terms of that fairy tale or folklore or poetry that we tell our children.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, no doubt about it. You know, we were so indoctrinated, so misled as Jamaicans for so many centuries that, you know, a lot of Jamaicans were in denial of their African roots, and that was because of lack of knowledge. But today, with the access to information that we have, as you said, you know, there were a significant number of Jamaicans who were actually kidnapped from Africa and then ended up in Jamaica. And we're also finding out from new research that we are doing now that there are also a significant number of Africans who were kidnapped from Britain and the British Isles and sent to Jamaica as well. These were obviously people originally of African origin, but had maybe settled in Britain and the British Isles for hundreds, possibly thousands of years. And, you know, it was about during the 1600s, were uprooted by Oliver Cromwell, and they cleared the highlands of the Africans, cleared the highlands of people of colour, and from Ireland and Scotland and parts of England, and transported them all to Jamaica, Barbados, what was the other major place that they sent us? America, to the Americas, and also Montserrat.
Okay.
Yeah, from Ireland, Scotland, England. Ooh, but they didn't tell us about that. Well, there are those of us who are doing that research, and we're realizing that we have deeper roots in Britain than they would want us to know about. But yeah, it's all coming out into the open. Right, Brother Kwame, let me go over to the chat and welcome the family in the audience. Welcome, everyone who's in the audience. Please drop me a note. Let me know that you're in the house. I can see Brother Kimani's in the house. Welcome. Mahogany's in the house. Philip's in the house. Yes, family members are coming through the door. Enough love. Haru's watching us from Manchester. Welcome all the way from Manchester. Phillips talked about ancient writings and pictures in the Arizona Grand Canyon. Yes, in the Americas. You know, our people left messages for us. They left their stories. They left evidence, you know, of their existence for us, for us to find today. So it's for us to do that research. Welcome, Sheriff S, who says Dakana Carmel and coconut. I don't like it, but Jamaicans call it blue drawers. I wonder where we get that name from, about blue drawers. Rise up, Sister Afro-Jamo, saying yes, enough similarities between Ghana and Jamaica, and she should know she's in Ghana right now. Rise up, to each and every one of you as you come through the door. I'm going to go back to the chat in a little while, so do keep dropping us messages in the chat, okay? And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already done so, please do give us a like. I was just posting the link to some of my chats there in the background as Brother Kwame was sharing with us a bit of information about his thesis and the similarities between the Ghanaians and the Jamaicans. And I remember when the Guardian newspaper published that article that provided the evidence that it was the Jamaican iron workers that sparked the European Industrial Revolution. Imagine. And the thing about it is that they said that it was 76 metallurgists in Jamaica that had developed this unique way of smelting metal. And it was this unique creative invention that the English basically stole that led to their industrial revolution. And they had the names of some of these Jamaican metallurgists. And some had names like Kwesi, which to me sounds like an African name.
Kwesi.
And Kwesi, yes. And some, you know, had European sounding names like Johnny and other Robinson and other names. And so to me, and these were names of people who were on the Jamaican plantation, like during the 1800s, early 1800s, probably late 1700s. And so there you have the names of Africans working alongside people with European names. Again, confirmation that some of the Africans who were there came from Europe with their European names and came from Africa with their African names. And we all ended up, on the same plantation. So interesting, very interesting history we've got. And we've got to start doing the research ourselves and rewriting it. Before we go into our main topic for discussion today, family, how many of you actually knew that there was an Italy-Africa summit happening in Italy? Oh, well, yeah, there was a summit that happened back on Monday. Italy's prime minister actually called African governments to come to Italy for a summit. She was talking about making promises for a new partnership, and she was saying that she developed a plan and wanted to improve relations between Africa and European nations. And the main objective of the summit, obviously, they have their agenda. Their agenda was, one, to reduce what they call illegal immigration. These immigrants, living on our land, and they want to, anyway, they were to reduce illegal immigration. And secondly, they wanted to open up a doorway so that they could get energy from Africa, to Europe. So that was their agenda. And they were dangling 5.5 billion bits of paper that they call euro, for real African assets, African energy, etc. And of course, at least 20 African countries went clamoring and went running to Italy. And let me first of all hear what Brother Kwame has to say about this invitation, their agenda, and these African governments and their response. Brother Kwame, should African governments really be running to Europe for anything at all?
Not really, because and I think it's quite disgusting that Italy of all people called this meeting, but again, not surprised, because let's not forget, is it Meloni? She won the Italian elections based on an anti-immigrant agenda, and we all know that Italy has problems with African migrants on its shores. So Lampedusa right now, as you speak, my sister, there's a massive camp that is holding more than 50,000 African people. Yeah, because Italy doesn't want them on mainland Italy, and Italy are thinking of deporting them back to Africa. And so, Meloni has a very, very anti-immigrant, anti-African agenda, because she doesn't want any Africans in Italy. And there was a recent clash that she had with the French government, saying that the reason why Africans are leaving Africa is because the French are milking Africa. Yeah, and that caused a bit of a diplomatic spat between Italy and France. And so Meloni calling this meeting is not surprising, because let's not forget, over the last sort of 3 to 5 years, there's been a EU-Africa summit, there's been a US-Africa summit, there's been a Turkey-Africa summit, there's been a China-Africa summit, there's been a Russia-Africa summit just last year, there's even been a UK-Africa summit. And people need to ask themselves, why is the main players? There's even been an Israel-Africa summit. Israel-Africa summit just the other day. Ask yourself,
why US? I'm sure there's been a US-Africa summit.
There's been US as well. On the Biden, I think Biden invited about 2 years ago, Africans to Washington DC to hold a so-called US-Africa summit. So the question you need to ask yourself is that why are all these main powers inviting African leaders to these summits? Yeah, it's not because they love Africans. Far from it. They
don't want them in their country. So
well, exactly.
They love Africans. They're happy to see them die in the desert, die in the Mediterranean Sea, die trying to climb the Alps. They don't want Africans in their country. But they have summits with the African leaders, and offer the African leaders bits of paper in return for their assets. You mean, what is it with African leaders, in your opinion, why they, up until now, just can't smell the coffee?
I think they've got, as one of our elders, Dr. Tabu, says, a colonial virus. They are so trusting of the European, of the European Caucasian, and believing that everything they say, and actual fact, believing that these very same descendants of those of their ancestors who raped, pillaged, and murdered African people are somehow have the collective vested interest of Africans at heart. So they actually believe that. So this is why they're happy to run to US, UK, Italy, wherever, to have these, for me, quite nonsensical summits. Not understanding that these summits are about these powers, be UK, US, Germany, whatever, they position themselves into Africa because each of these countries got an African agenda.
Yeah.
So US has an African policy, UK has an African policy. The French obviously have a France Afrique African policy. All these countries have an African policy, and their policy is to rape and continue to exploit more of Africa for their benefit at the expense of the African emancipation. And so why these well, they're not leaders in my view, they are puppets and they are, overseers for the corporations. So because they are conditioned in that colonial virus, they unfortunately cannot see the real hidden agenda of the European and the Chinese and the Indian behind these circle summits. So, I think that answers your question basically.
Thanks. Let's go over to the chat. Family in the chat. When these African governments are run by Europe, is it as our brother Kwame has been saying that, and brother Dr. Abu said that they suffer from the colonial virus and really believe that these are former kidnappers? We were just talking about, the Holocaust, the Magnamese, the people who enslaved us for hundreds of years suddenly have our best interest at heart. Let's see what our family say in the chat. Sharif S says, the Ghanaian president well sick with the colonial virus. And Janet saying, no, I suppose they definitely do not have our interest at home. Philip's like, colonial virus, exactly. Craig Safar is in the house saying, hello, Shanice, and the chat. I'm here sitting in a mall and having a croissant as I listen to the show. Oh, fantastic. Whereabouts in the world are you having that croissant? And yeah, let us know. Sheriff says they know they can't survive without us and that the end is nigh for them. Welcome, Haru, who says, we are the indigenous people of this planet. Yes, we are indeed. And Sheriff says, partnership, make them go away. Indeed, we need you as one of the leaders, make them go away indeed about partnership. Some of us can see right through, their rhetoric. Dee says, greetings, family. Rise up, Dee. Rise up, Philip. Glad to have you in the house. Welcome again, Sister Afro-Jamo. Let me scroll up, see if I missed some of the earlier ones. Mahogany is in the house. Yes, rise up, Kwame. Mandela is in the house as well. Yenge Pimpa Kiambote. Sister Shanice and Brother Kwame Osei, as well as all the brothers and sisters in the chat. The Congo Leopard salutes you from the UKKK. Rise up, Mandela. Good to have you in the house as well. Sheriff S is sending us a love. Dr. Shanice, rise up. Rise up. And so, rising up, everybody in the house, Sister Afro-Jamo, big up again. And, I can't understand. Janet saying, Bisalo Bio KK. I don't know what that one is. Okay, great so far. Those dummies wanna attach themselves to us because they're dying. Yes. Hola, good to have you in the house as well. So the family's in the house, Brother Kwame, and I think they're seeing things the way we do. And so why so many of us in the chat, seeing through the rhetoric of leaders like the Italian Prime Minister, who on the one hand, as you said, has been elected on an anti-immigrant status. I mean, why would you want to go and sit around the table with someone who has made it so clear that they are anti your people, anti your citizens, don't want your citizens in their country, are prepared to allow them to die in the Mediterranean Sea rather than, have the ships pick them up, have them by the tens of thousands, in concentration camps rather than allowing them into your city. Why would you want to sit around the table with someone like that? My gosh, it's beyond me, and you have a situation where the European Union, they're paying Russia, like in February, they paid Russia around 84.5 billion for gas, oil, and coal. 84.5 billion. Yeah. And this is the sort of money that they are paying Russia for gas and oil. And here it's got, in the next 12 months, even though it's gone down a bit, the EU could still be paying 21 billion to Russia for gas, rising to 55 billion. Yeah, and that's just, sorry, beg pardon?
I was going to say that's the reason why the South Africa, because they've put sanctions on Russia because of this European tribal war that they've got with Ukraine, and they don't want to depend on Russian gas and oil as they've been doing, so they want to wean themselves away from it. So this is another strategy as to how to get more cheap oil and gas by coming to Africa, because they know that Africa is the final frontier. Africa is home to more than 70% of the world's mineral resources. Africa is home to more than 6% of the world's unused land, arable fertile land. Africa is home to the youngest population in the world. There are more people under 30 in Africa than the whole of the world put together. Yeah, so Africa has a powerful, workforce. Also, a lot of the technology that are being used to further the Western industry, i.e., lithium-ion battery, which is a new kid on the block now, that is used to make electric cars, the LED computers, etc. All those materials are found in Africa, and this is why Italy is now jumping on board late in the game to have African countries to further Italy's neo-colonial agenda and also their socio-economical agenda for their own purposes, and to continue to exploit Africa for their own purposes. And we as African people, those of us who are astute and know the European, know the occasion, know that this is their game, and that they have not got the interest of African people at heart. And I'm saying to Ghanaians, I'm saying to Nigerians, I'm saying to Botswanans, I'm saying to Malians, Kenyans, Zimbabweans, I'm saying to the whole continent, you got to make your so-called leaders accountable, because they want to sell our birthright, your birthright, to the highest bidder. And for me, this so-called Italy-Africa summit is trying to sell Africa to the Italian bidder.
Yes, indeed. France is very unpopular at the moment in Africa, as we all know. So they're putting, another one of their very same leaders in front to try and do new deals that's going to tie us up for another 30, 50 years or what have you. I just hope they weren't signing anything there. I'm looking at some of the figures,
They probably will.
I'm looking at the sums of money involved that the European Union are having to pay Russia. Even since the war in Ukraine, I mean, one article is saying that that the amount that the EU member states are actually spending on Russian fuels is actually increasing. One said double. Radio Free Europe is saying that Russia nearly doubled its income from energy sales, to Europe, and this is despite the war. This article here was counting that Russia has sold 46.46 billion euros worth of energy resources to the European Union, and that figure, is intended to rise. And, we were hearing in another article that it's going to be rising to around 55 billion. And how Russia is actually supplying, this is of 2020, 24.4% of the EU's gross available energy, and that only satisfied 41.7% of their needs. So there's a huge gap there in terms of Europe's energy needs. Russia supplying a quarter of that and making so much money, billions, from that. Russia Fossil Tracker payments to Russia for fossil fuels. And according to our estimates, this is Russia's fossil tracker now, their estimates since the beginning of the war, Russia actually earned 590 billion in revenue from fossil fuel experts. And, you know, if I go into the article, it'll tell me how much of that actually came in from the European Union. 590 billion. And how much are they dangling to Africa? All Africa and all those African countries, their fossil fuels. 5.5 billion? Really? Oh my gosh, it's like a drop in the ocean. It's like a spit in the face, isn't it? You know, this is how much they're paying Russia on an annual basis. Billions. These vast, huge sums, 84 billion, 21 billion here, another 55 billion there, and 24.4% of the EU's supplies, you know, and they've got a huge gap here. And Russia sees a 38% rise in energy export earnings, according to Al Jazeera. That was in 2022. Russia is expected to pocket 337.5 billion in energy. So clearly we know that what Italy and Europe wants to do is they want to reduce their dependency on Russia, and they want to go over to we'll give them a little 5 billion, or Sano, we'll give them a little 5 billion, and then we'll build a pipeline from Africa right into Europe. Oh my gosh, it just never stops, does it?
No, the exploitation of Africa hasn't stopped, and like these people are hell bent on exploiting Africa for their purpose. So if African people in the motherland don't stand up right, these puppets like Mnangagwa, like Ruto, like Akufo-Addo, like in Nigeria, Tinubu, like La Côte d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara in Equatorial Guinea, Theodore Obiang, all these puppets in Ukraine, they're just going to sell your birthright away, and we can't allow them to sell our birthright away cheaply as well. They're paying Russia, the EU is paying Russia in excess of $500 billion, right, for their energy, and they want to give us 5.5 billion for 40 countries. No, and it tells you that despite the sanctions, so-called, the Russian economy hasn't collapsed, because in the West they will let you know that the Russian economy has collapsed, but they're paying Russia 500 billion, euros or dollars for their oil and gas. And I saw a report that in 2024 the Russian economy is going to grow faster than Britain, America, France, and Germany.
Wow.
Their sanctions.
And, hence why they want to try and reduce their dependency on Russia to try and cripple their economy. Well, so far, it just hasn't worked at all whatsoever. Rise up. Sister Carol's in the house saying, Sister, you have a very intelligent platform. Also, thank you for not using any bad or vulgar language. Oh, no need for that. Rise up, Sister Carol. Sister Afrijamo is keeping a count on the likes. She said, we've only got 18 likes so far, and there's 53 in the house watching. And those are 53 watching live. There are, probably twice the amount who are behind time. So please do give us a like. I don't can't see anything, man. Just give me a like, no man. What to Rise up, Richmond. Good to have you in the house. And Afrijamo's like, they can't leave us alone. They just can't leave us as Africans alone. Yes, Philip, we're seeing through the rhetoric. The figures says it all. Wow. Well, let's watch this space, shall we? Because next thing you got here, a new pipeline is gonna run from somewhere in Africa directly. If they haven't already been, built it, and are not siphoning it off, because do you remember in Nigeria they found that extra pipeline that was going somewhere into Europe that had been there for decades that no one knew anything about. Free oil. So when they build a pipeline, they say, oh, let me build an extra one and cover this one over. Oh my days, as we said, the exploitation has never stopped, and it will never stop. For as long as we allow ourselves to be exploited, of course they're going to take advantage and exploit us. And for as long as we have licky leaders who are prepared to sell out the country for some bits of paper, we are in a bad shape and a bad way. And, I look forward to some of those leaders actually disappearing off the political landscape. Anyway, Brother Kwame, let's go over to our main topic for discussion today. We have Brother Kwame in the house, family, because we've been doing a series on being Black and living in Britain, because as I was saying earlier, a lot of people out there don't know that Africans, are actually living in Britain, and don't know that there are many Africans that have been living here for decades, and some maybe descendants of some of the original Africans of this region, because they very cleverly cut us out of the media and their pictures and their imagery to give the impression that Britain is all white. Well, it's not all white. We're there. And Brother Kwame has been living in Britain from about the age of 13. Brother Kwame, first of all, I wonder if you could share with us, what was your impression of Britain when you was a young boy growing up, before you actually made the journey? What was the kind of narrative, the indoctrination? What was the teaching that you were getting about Britain before you arrived?
Yeah, so having been sort of born and raised in Ghana, I went to primary school in Ghana, a school called Morning Star in Accra, in Ghana. And obviously you have the sort of, and it still is the same today in Ghana, the European curriculum. So we're glorifying everything in the West. And, I was a Christian at the time as well. So both my parents were Christian. So I was kind of, in quote, born into a Christian family. So went to church and all that. And so had this very sort of Ghanaian straight Christian upbringing. And so at school, that was enforced as well. And also this thing about, Europe or London, or particularly UK. So, you see on the TV images of the UK, London being this, great city, and like, white people walking around and that kind of thing. And, you have the sort of impression that it's a beautiful place to be, and that the people look so nice and friendly, and the environment looks so clean, and that, it looks much better than where you are in Ghana. And so that was the images that was fed by us, that, this country called UK is a great country, great place to be, nice people, nice environment, clean environment, and, supposedly a lot of opportunities. So, that was the impression that I certainly had of the UK, not having visited the UK before, and that kind of thing. So yeah, so I left Ghana, I think it was 82, because that time royalists had come in and there was a coup in Ghana, and this is quite difficult at that time. So, but by that time, unfortunately, my father had passed away. He was an ancestor. He died when I was 8, and he became an ancestor. And so basically, my mum took myself, my brother, and my sister to UK, thinking that we'll have a better, quality of life, so to speak. So I came to the UK 82, and one of the first impressions that I got was very, very cold. Arriving from obviously a tropical hot country like Ghana, and like, it was very, very cold. I remember that. I think the day that we arrived in the UK, I think it was snowing. It was pretty cold, but I think it was snowing as well. And it was so, the environment was so damp and that kind of thing. I said, Mum, what have you brought us to? But she was obviously of the impression that would get a good education, because, as you may know, Sister Shanice, African families value education, particularly Africans on the continent. They've got this thing about, and particularly British education, and it still is today, for some strange thing, we have this, adoration for British education, Britishness. So my mother thought she was doing a good thing by bringing us to the UK and having a British education. And that British education, even today, is still valued. Believe it or not, you have many British universities, i.e. John Moores, Liverpool, Nottingham and Trent, University of Hull, Manchester University. Actually, some of them come to Ghana to recruit Ghanaians to come and do courses here. And actual fact, there's a British university called Lancaster University It's actually Accra in Ghana, and they actually, you know, Ghanaian students actually study at that Lancaster University, because obviously, you know, as African people, like I said, we still have this high adoration for the British system of education. And so, you know, being a Christian, I went to a Catholic school in the UK, and that school was called Trinity School. And to be honest with you, my experience in that school wasn't that great. So this is, like I said, the early 80s. And for those people who are not familiar with the UK in the early 80s, so basically, you know, Thatcher just got in, Margaret Thatcher, and she came in on the anti-immigrant kind of ticket, the same way that we just discussed with Maloney in Italy. And at the time, there was a lot of social unrest in the UK in the 80s. Obviously, as one of my great elders, Leader Bandaka, said last week about the New Cross disaster, or for me, the New Cross assassination, whereby innocent black children just having fun at a party were innocently killed by some no good white people. And also, you know, we had also the Brixton uprising, because of a lot of inequality in the country in those days. And also, you know, the police stop and search, particularly of young African men, was also a big thing back then, as it is today, and I'll come on to that later on. And so, you know, and also those uprisings in places like Nottingham, in Liverpool, in Bristol, in the 80s as well. So it was a very, very toxic environment in the early 80s. And that didn't escape in school. So even in school, where you thought that one would be safe and that one would, you know, have the sort of comradeship of white peoples and also white teachers, you know, very sad to say, and this is true, that, you know, we were racially insulted by both the white teachers and also the white peoples. And back in those days, the 80s, there were hardly any African teachers, you know, as compared to what they are now. So it was purely, you know, European, Caucasian teachers, you know, and they sometimes will get called the N-word, believe it or not. You know, we'll get called Jungle Bunny, you know, Snowflake. Those are the ones that I remember, Jungle Bunny, Snowflake. There's loads of others, but those were the two that I remember, the three that I remember the most: the N-word, Jungle Bunny, Coon, Snowflake. Yeah, those four, what I vividly remember. And that was by the teachers who you think are coming to give you an indication, but these teachers were actually bigoted as well, and were not shy of bringing their anti-African behavior to the school environment. Also had that from white people as well. So when I was in Ghana, like I said, you know, these white people are benevolent, are holy, they're friendly, them, and that kind of thing. But the reality is that when we came to the UK, particularly in the school environment, that was definitely not the case. Oftentimes, you know, white boys and girls would just call you names under the sun. You know, they even try and pick a fight with you, that kind of thing. And even talking of fights, you know, back in the early 80s, there was a political movement called the National Front, that was in Britain in the late 70s into the early 80s. And for those of you who are not familiar with the National Front are like a far-right neo-Nazi group that believe in whiteness. They believe in that every person who's not white should go back to the country of origin, so-called, and that, you know, white people should not integrate with black people. That's basically what they believe in. And so after school, I remember, you know, and this was commonplace amongst black children, not just in Nottingham, where we came to, but in London, in Birmingham, in Manchester, in Liverpool, in Bristol. You had National Front skinheads fight with us outside school. So I remember vividly, right, being beaten by a skinhead, you know, outside the school in Nottingham. And we had to toughen up pretty quick. So I bought some knuckle dusters to protect myself. So, you know, we'd fight back. So we wouldn't just take it, we'd fight back with the skinheads and show them that, you know, you can't really mess about with us. So as compared to today, where a lot of black schoolboys see each other as the enemy. Back then, the mid-80s, you know, as black schoolboys, black school children, the enemy was definitely the white man, particularly the National Front, because they had no scruples in wanting to pick fights with black children. And this is us 12, 13, 14. And these skinheads were like 18, 19 in their 20s. They wanted to pick fights with us because of the hatred and the political environment that existed at the time. So my school journey was kind of mixed. But funny enough, you know, such as is our schooling in Ghana, is that I came to the UK. I actually taught white people maths. I taught white people maths because I was very good at maths at the time. And I brought that skill with me, you know, obviously to UK. And I remember teaching white people maths. And I remember in my school report of that year, 82, the teacher said that, you know, I was a very, very good student and that I was actually teaching white people maths. So it tells you that we have the genius in us as African people. And actually we were teaching these white people who so-called are smart and intelligent, but it's actually us that were teaching them mathematics. I remember one boy in particular who I sat down next to in class, in a math class. He was just basically copying and pasting whatever I was doing. Yeah, he didn't have a clue, right, what the teacher was talking about, whether it was trigonometry, algebra, geometry, what have you, right? That white child saying, listen, we're just copying, pasting what I was doing. And I was showing him, right, the geometry, the algebra, the calculus, you know, the trigonometry, etc., that were taught, you know, in school. So that was kind of funny that, you know, we were being attacked by white peoples, but at the same time, we were actually showing them things like maths, science, and that kind of thing. And it was quite funny how that kind of transpired. So, to cut a long story short, I left school in 1986. Yeah, 86. And because of the racism, or I would rather call it Afrophobia, which is fear of African people, and that still transpires to today, you know, my grades when I left school wasn't too good. I did 3 O levels at the time, and I got D's and E's in all of them. So I didn't pass my O levels. So I had to go to college and not resit. I chose to do the BTEC route, which is like national vocational qualifications. So I went down that route and I was able to do, you know, my BTEC in college. And even at college, so this is 1986, 87, even at college, we still had the, you know, the Afrophobia abuse, you know, and this is predominantly by the people, not by the teachers per se, because the environment back in the 80s was not as bad as it was in the 80s. I mean, by the mid 80s, you know, things had calmed down a bit slightly. You know, the overt Afrophobia that was present in 82, 83, 84, 85, particularly during those years of uprising, wasn't there after the uprising. So by the time uprising ended in 85, you know, a lot of the vicious anti-African abuse that was evident in 82, 83 particularly, has subsided by 86, 87. And so the overt anti-African racism that we had in school wasn't as much as it was, you know, during my college years. So I was able to concentrate more on my studies during that period, and I got a first diploma in my BTEC, and then I went on to further that to do another 2-year BTEC national diploma, and again that was in the late 80s to early 90s now. Now by that time, you know, a lot of, you know, kind of, how can I put this? A lot of integration had happened or was beginning to happen. And when I mean by integration, what I mean by that is two-pronged. I mean that there was a lot of now sort of relationships between young black men and white women. That kind of started in the late 80s. Not so many black women with white men. There were 1 or 2, but there were not many, you know, in those days. But what was beginning to happen was that integration, whereby a lot or some black boys, black men would have relations with Caucasian European women. So by the time I went to second, the second tier of my college education, there was more integration, so to speak, by Africans into Britain. So the racism that was apparent, particularly in the early mid-80s, I won't say it went completely, but it subsided, in my second sort of tier of college between 89 and about 92. Yeah, that was my second period of college. So in that, I did my BTEC National diploma. And again, to cut a long story short, I passed that. And then I went on to uni. So it was during this period whereby I began to get Black consciousness, because in Ghana, there was no Black consciousness to speak. We had history, yeah, but it was mainly Ghana orientated. So it was things like Kwame Nkrumah. It was things like, the Asante culture, or the Asante Wars, so a bit of Ga culture and that kind of thing. It wasn't too deep. So the history that I had in Ghana was basically like limited. So in the sort of early 90s, where I was living in Nottingham, which was the area called St. Anne's, which had at the time had a high degree of Africans living there. So I would say at the time, 80s and early 90s, I'd say about 25% of the population of St. Anne's was African Caribbean. So one of the centers that we had was a center called UKD, and they offered a Black Studies course. I thought, okay, I saw a flyer. Okay, what's this about? Black Studies course. Never read that before. So studying Black history, Black culture. I thought, okay, this looks interesting. Let me go to this Black history course. So, Sister Shanice, when I went to this Black history course, my life changed for the better. My life changed completely. So I became like very, very Black conscious, part of my history and culture and achievements that we had achieved as African people worldwide, not just in East Africa, but worldwide. So when I went to university in 1992, I was sort of Black consciousness, yeah. And during my course, so I did a business admin at University of Derby in the 90s. So one memory that stands out for me is 1993. Now, 1993 is when Stephen Lawrence, we can put that in the chat somewhere. Stephen Lawrence was a young Black man. He was 18 at the time, and he was viciously murdered by 5 anti-African or anti-Black Caucasian white youths. And that incident was so tragic, it was so heart-wrenching that a young Black boy just standing at a bus stop in Eltham, South East London, just waiting for a bus, like we all did at the time and still do, waiting for a bus, was called the N-word by these 5 Europeans, called the N-word, and was fatally stabbed. Yeah. So again, in the late 80s, early 90s, again, this National Front thing kind of resurfaced again, but this time under the guise of the BNP, the so-called British National Party. So in Britain, around about the early 90s, there was a lot of violence by white people on Black people, as it was in the early 80s. And obviously this culminated in the stabbing and murder of Stephen Lawrence in 1993. That time I was in university, I was my second year of university. And that really took us, the Black students that were there were not many of us, but that really hit us for 6, so to speak. Because Stephen Lawrence was basically about our age. So we could resonate with that. We could resonate with the killing of Stephen Lawrence. Because I remember even standing outside Derby University, right? And even at the time of Derby, there was members of the BNP standing outside Derby University giving away flyers and leaflets. So we, as African students in Derby, we were open. We saw at first hand this, anti-African bigotry, manifest itself in terms of the BNP handing out leaflets in Derby and picketing places like Ilkeston, Hina, Cottonmillet. These are hotbeds of anti-Black activity. And the BNP were very, very active in Derby, particularly Ilkeston, Cottonmillet, and Hina, very, very active in those areas. And so Derby was one of their kind of strongholds, so to speak. So we were, as African students, we were exposed to that horror show in terms of the BNP. And so when Stephen Lawrence got brutally murdered by those racist white thugs, it really hit us. And I became active. So I joined one of the African student bodies, and I became very reactive. And I remember on one day I had a coat and I put on it "No to Racism." So because I had a coat "No to Racism," I became a target, so to speak, for a lot of the white teachers. And so long story short, I was marked down in my degree, so I didn't go on to a third year. So I had to redo my second year before going back to do my third year last year because of that, that activism that was instilled in me because of the Black Studies course that I had been exposed to. Had I not been exposed to that Black Studies course, I may not have been an activist, let alone the person that I am now, an ardent, strong, and unapologetic African, unapologetic Pan-Africanist. So I was, downgraded, so to speak, for my second year in 1993. And that again showed me, right, the hypocrisy and also the double standards and the skullduggery of white people. Why would you want to downgrade a person just because of his activism? It wasn't because I failed that particular subject or that discipline. It was because they saw me and with my activism, and I became a target. So this is why they had to mark me down in my second year, and I had to repeat my second year. But again, cut long story short, I was able to, get my degree in 1995. And so, I came out of university in 1995. And at that time,
before you move on now beyond your schooling years, wow, wow, wow. What a journey. Imagine a young man coming up from Ghana, age 13, with a blue-eyed impression of all white people, European, being wonderful, charitable type people, because you'd only met these lovely Christian people before then. And, you come up with your Christian family with, all of this indoctrination of how wonderful European and white people were, and you go to school and you were abused by adults, not just your peers, but by the teachers, called all sorts of racist names by the teachers. And obviously, again, you came up thinking that the European education system was just so superior to that of Africa. And here you are, based on the education and the learning and the teaching that you had in Africa, able to teach children trigonometry and a whole range of mathematics out here, showing, that should have been proof that the standard of education in Ghana that you were getting was on par or higher in standard than that the English were getting here. But the English are so good at spinning a story about how great they are. They make the whole world believe that, they are the greatest. Oh my God. And so you're in school, you're getting abuse from the parents, they're outside the school, and you're getting abused by the young people as well. And presumably you bring some of this information back home to tell your mom what was going on in the schools. Do you remember any of those conversations with your mom about the racism that you was experiencing, the name calling by the teachers in the school? And if so, how did those conversations go? Your mom must have been just horrified.
Yeah, my mom was kind of horrified and shocked because she wouldn't have thought that, white people would be like that. Because when they come to Africa, because I remember one time when I was in Ghana, they came to a school, a primary school, and they donated some items. So we had this impression that they were dissing people that would come all the way from Africa to give us these donations, etc. So when I told my mom that I had been a victim of this horrific, racist or anti-African abuse, she was kind of horrified. And she even went to school. I remember she went to school one time and had the word with the teachers and head teachers saying that, this is no way to treat a child. I bring my child from Africa. I don't expect my child, from Africa to be, subject to this abuse. He's there to learn. So I don't know why you are treating him in this manner. So my mum went to school more than one occasion, but it didn't really stop the anti-African racist abuse that I had during, the 3 or 4 years I was at, Trinity.
Wow. Wow. Imagine. So you've got all of that going on in school, and then you go on to college. And while you're there, similar experiences again. But then you came across this Black History Studies course.
Yeah.
What a powerful course that must have been. I mean, give us an idea, if you can remember, some of the main topics, subjects that were actually discussed in that course, because it just changed your life.
It did.
It opened your eyes. It took the scale away from your eyes of these, white people being it like angels that had come out of heaven and come to Africa to save us, kind of thing. So yeah, can you remember the course?
I remember the course. I did for yesterday. So it was an 8-week course, and the teacher was he's a now ancestor, George Anthony. May he so rest in power. I believe he became an ancestor 2 years ago. But yeah, he was a fantastic teacher, George Anthony. And the course included things like ancient Egypt. Never did know about Egypt, when I was in Ghana. So that blew me away. That blew me off. Ancient Egypt, knowing that was African civilization. We also talked about some of the kingdoms, like Mali, Shanghai, Timbuktu, the Ghana Empire. Believe it or not, that was not taught in schools in Ghana, that West African history. We talked about history in Ghana. So I didn't know anything about the Mali Empire, Shanghai, Timbuktu, the great empires in West Africa in particular. Didn't know about that. And then there was a course also taught us about also history in India. I said, wow, India, were we in India as well? Wow, I never knew that. So the course taught about the African independence in India. The first civilization in India was the Indus Kush. And also, of course, talked about Africans in China as well, and that also blew me away. I didn't know that there were Africans in China, let alone African history. And our teacher taught us that the first Africans in China were the Shang dynasty, and that was about 1,777 years before so-called Christ. Wow! And I thought, wow. So yeah, those are some of the disciplines that was taught during that Black Studies course. And like I said, that changed my life forever. That 8-week course changed my life forever and changed my outlook about our people, our history, our culture. And I'm ever thankful to Baba George. That's what we used to call him, Baba George. And I know his spirit is shining amongst me and shining amongst us today. As he is now an ancestor. So I'll be ever grateful to Baba George Anthony for enlightening myself and others by the African history that he told us, or taught us rather, in the early 90s. Yeah.
Wow, may his soul rest in power. Yes, and his spirit continue to influence you and others who did his course. Wow. Just going to bring in the audience for a few minutes, and then we're going to go back to you on the journey. Rise up, Brother Kwame Osei. Good to have you in the house. He says it's so true that our school and colleges in our mamaland shamefully taught the history of non-Africans rather than our own history, which is a disgrace. And it's still going on now, isn't it? It's still the same now. Rise up, Brother Gary's in the house. He says, now you're talking, brother. Yes, Songhai Empire. Yeah, what's that? Askia Muhammad. Okay, rise up, Brother Kwame Osei. It's so true. Oh, yes, that's the same one twice, or it's just fixed back up again. Sheriff S says, Kwame Osei, 2 went to jail. 1 is supposed to be still there, but the other may be out. However, with Doreen Lawrence sitting in the House of Lords, she should be exercising her power to keep him there. So they went on to talk about the Stephen Lawrence situation that happened while you were at college. And Richmond says the jealousy still makes them hate so much. Gary Ricketts says, I was more afraid of my dad than whites. He laid down the law upon me. Yes, believe. Yeah. Philip's thanking you. Dee Dee saying, my parents were brainwashed. They never believed those in official positions would do such things. We did have some parents like that, probably said, I must say, you will get yourself in trouble. Go school and be every stuff. The teachers would never be like that. They are there for your own best interest. But at least your mother, she heard you. She believed you. She went to the school. Mm-hmm. Yes, I know that one, Dee Dee. Sheriff says, Kwame Osei, the Lawrences took out a private prosecution and lost. So the other three couldn't be tried again due to the double jeopardy law. Family, I told you when one of my cousins ignorantly saying that the so-called education system in this country, she values it. You see how misguided we are. Exactly. And it's the same in Jamaica. The Jamaican education system was superior to that here in the UK. When children came over from Jamaica to join us in the schools here, they were higher. They were teaching the children, the British children as well, because, they were so far advanced. And so many more points. I'm going to bring in some more of the questions and comments that you have been making in the chat. And thanks for giving us a thumbs up, those of you who have already done so. Thanks, Sister Afrijamo. Please do give us a thumbs up. Rise Up Chairs is in the house. Says, as soon as I entered the room, I said, greetings, ones and ones, by hitting the like button. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we've got Brother Kwame, who's sharing with us his experience of coming to Britain and what his life was like from the age of a teenager and his experiences. And wow, what a journey, what an experience. Oh my gosh. And so you were getting hit left, right, and center verbally, and threats of attacks and everything else. And then obviously there was the serious case of Stephen Lawrence. And even though you were in Nottingham at the time, or Derby, which is what, 100 miles away from London or something, you were all still impacted all the way down there by the Stephen Lawrence murder. And of course, there was uprisings that happened as a result of that. Enough fire, place I get burned down because of that. All over London on fire, Manchester burning strong, woolly of fire as a result of that incident, and yet the police still tried to cover up those murderers, didn't they? Anyway, you've gone through your school, your college and university. You're out the other end finally after having been marked down and made to have to sit your degree twice, but you hanged on in there. They didn't disillusion you because a lot of people give up. They do that deliberately. Damn our people, fail our people, so we give up, and go away, But no, you hanged on in there. Good for you. They tried that with me as well, but I hanged on in there as well. But anyway, it's your story, your time. Back now. So you've come out, you've got your degree.
Yeah, so I got my degree in 95. Unfortunately, it was a bad time for me to leave university, because at the time in the UK, there was like a recession in the UK around about mid-90s. So I became unemployed. But fortunate enough for me, there was in Nottingham, we had a local African group called, I think it was Marcus Garvey Centre. We still have that today. And they had, as part of their remit, help to get Black people into work, and the scheme was called Patra. I don't know what it stands for, but Patra, yeah. And so I applied to go into a Patra course to see about getting an intern with a company in Nottingham. So I think this was funded by the council, because obviously there was like I said, there was a recession at the time. And there was a lot of local authority money, about the place to help African people, because at the time, unemployment rates among African people were very, very high. It was something about 4 or 5 times likely, compared to white or Europeans, in the mid-90s. So there was all these programs to try and get African people back to work. So I went to one of these programs, that Patrick were doing in Nottingham. And lucky enough, I was able to get an intern with the local authority as a trainee auditor, and this was 1996. You know, so I went in there as a trainee auditor, and again, being the only, well, there was
The
one
trainee auditor, did you say?
trainee auditor, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was only one African apart from myself there. And that
And what
African,
year was this? Sorry, what year was this?
1996.
Okay.
And that African, unfortunately, was, you know, they're the same that you say, Sister Shanice, that not all skin folk are kinfolk. So this black or African man that was there was not one of those you could like kind of liaise with kind of thing. Because, you know, I found out he was married to a white woman as well, so he was, you know, one of them. So basically, I was left on my own, so to speak. And you know, I had, you know, this white guy showing me the ropes of, you know, how to do auditing, you know, how to do audit checks, audit inspections, and that kind of thing. So, you know, during the job, you know, you'd get snide comments from white people, and that still happens. So any black person, any African person that's worked in corporate white environment, particularly the local authority or even corporate UK, will come across those, you know, back in the day, it wasn't called microaggressions. It was called these petty things that white people said at the back, or, you know, about, you know, this guy coming here trying to do audit, because obviously audit is a technical kind of discipline, and not that many black people then, African people then, were doing auditing. So you had these kind of off the cuff remarks, you know, that I just basically ignored them, you know. So, you know, I just, you know, did my traineeship and that kind of thing. So I was there for a year, and that was great. So I learned a lot about auditing, particularly local authority auditing. And then my first job was in the council, actually. You know, no, before that, I had a job at the Inland Review. So I applied for a job at the Inland Review in Nottingham, and I got that job. And that was like a revenue assistant. Revenue assistant. Yeah, that was just looking at files and cases, that kind of thing. And I had an altercation actually with a white person because, like I said, they have these mannerisms that work, you know, they have these off the cuff remarks. And because, you know, back then I was African centered and black conscious, I was not going to take any crap from white people. So to cut a long story short, I was sacked from that role because there was a so-called internal investigation as to how me and the white guy had this you know, this fallout. So basically, long short of that was I got sacked from the role I did at the Inland Review, and then in 1998, I got my first, you could say, full-time job with the local authority, and that was basically doing admin for policy and planning unit of Nottingham City Council. And funny enough, you know, the manager at the time was a mixed race guy. I never forget his name was Brandon, and he was actually quite conscious. Actually, he was actually a mixed race guy who was put in care, but also became black conscious when he was young, and he married a black woman. And I was under his tutelage, and that was pretty interesting. For my first time, in my first really full-time permanent job, to actually get, you know, a mixed race manager who was, you know, African centered, which is quite surprising, even now, let alone in 1998. So I had a good, you know, rapport and relationship with Brandon, because basically it was just him and me being the people of color, you know, in that department at the time. So I enjoyed my role, even though it was like basic admin, you know, photocopying, typing, writing letters, you know, minutes of meeting, that kind of thing. It still got me in the door of the local authority. When I began to see rather the workings of the local authority. And then I got another job quickly after that in 1999 as a benefits officer. So that was my, you could say, that really, really first big job as a benefits officer, you know, processing claims for, back then it was housing benefit and council tax benefit. I'm not sure if it's still the same now, but you do have some kind of benefit for housing benefit and council tax benefit. But back then in 1999, you know, it was very, very much, one of the key or core benefits that people were getting in this country. So, people couldn't pay their rent or couldn't pay their council tax, they'll claim for benefits. And my job there was to basically assess their claim for benefits. So the benefits back then were means tested. So it was basically based on your ability to pay. So basically, we checked the income of the claimer, and then would see as a result of that how much benefit that person would be entitled to. So I really enjoyed that job because basically I got to know the workings of the housing benefit system and also the council benefit system. So I really enjoyed that role. But then again, I applied for another job because I always wanted to move, within the council. So that was benefit. So I got another job in 2000, and this was in social services. And then that exposed me at first hand. So and this was basically children living care. So I worked in the children living care team, as an assistant to a social worker. And I saw at first hand the anti-Black racism that Black children were getting in the whole social services system, and that opened my eyes. That opened my eyes a lot to how the council treated Black children and how the system also treated Black children who were coming out of care. So these children were basically let down by their parents, and they're left home and they sought to live independently, so independent care, and so forth and so forth. The social services department was supposed to give these children who were vulnerable anyway because of the fact that their parents didn't care for them, and that they went into these homes and they're coming out of these homes to live independently. So the council's job was to actually get these children and give them the tools to be more independent, so to speak, so that they could live independently. But that's where I saw firsthand about how the system treated us as compared to Europeans. So I did that job, again, long short of it, I did that job for, about 2 or 3 years. And then I landed another big role. Now, in the early 2000s, this is at the height of the Blair government, there was a lot of projects, again, for the African and Caribbean community in England, specifically somewhere like Nottingham, because there was a report at the time that Nottingham City was the 8th most deprived council or borough in the UK. And so there's a lot of money thrown in Nottingham City, and one of those projects was specifically geared to look at, development within the African Caribbean community. And so essentially, there was this organization set up called the African Caribbean Development Agency. And I got a job there as a researcher. So my job as a researcher was to research, kind of social, economic issues that were pertinent to the African Caribbean community. So health, education, employment, business startups, and there's another one that was my remit. So for me, that was a very, very, and that sort of began my community work. It's sort of attached to what I was doing in the community. So back in the late 90s, I was part of a group in Nottingham called Brother to Brother. It's similar to Brother Aston's Black Father Support Group, and again, I was exposed to a lot of work in the community and saw firsthand, just how bad that the society treats us as a community. So one of the things that we did as part of Brother to Brother was, get young Black men who were kind of vulnerable onto what we call Rites of Passage program. Now, for those of you who don't know what Rites of Passage is, in traditional Africa, I'm not talking about the cities, I'm talking about basically the rural areas of Africa, particularly in the villages. There's something that we call a Rites of Passage program, where young boys and young girls go through stages in their adolescence. So from teenage to young adulthood to mid-adulthood, etc., whereby they are taught how to be a man, how to be a woman, what their responsibility as men are within the family structure and the community structure, what their responsibility as young girls are in the community, in the nation, etc. So we, as Brother to Brother, had a rites of passage program, and that was devised by one of our brothers called Ifayomi. And we use that program to actually, get those young black boys and train them from, boyhood to manhood. And I'm pleased to say that, a lot of the young boys that went through that program have now become quote unquote big men. One of them, I bumped into one of them the other day, and coming from the bus, he says, are you Kwame? He says, yeah. He says, why? He says, I'm Imani. I'm one of the brothers that, young boys that went on your book to book program. I said, oh, yeah. He says, how you doing? He says, I'm doing all right, And he says, what are you doing now? He says, and believe it or not, he's actually a housing manager for local authority. Housing manager. Black man, I think he's in his mid-30s, Imani, right? And he says, thanks to you, not me personally, but brother to brother, what you did for me, right, helped me, navigate myself as a young black man and made me more assertive, more confident of myself, for me to be able to now be a housing manager for local authorities. And I was shocked. When he said that to me, I was just shocked. And I thought to myself, yeah, brother to brother, we did a lot of good work, in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I mean, you mentioned Brother to Brother, and there were so many other, initiatives that you mentioned as part of your journey there.
Yeah.
Projects and programs that were targeted at our community and that were really helpful. Helps you, helps young Amani and other young people, in a similar position to progress. And, that's what came out of the Stephen Lawrence report, the riots, the discontentment within the community, the uprisings, all of this, activism on the streets, because you talked about your personal activism, and there was a lot of activism at the same time, and organizations and groups, campaigning on the streets during these times as well, wasn't there? So, it was a hotbed of political activity and political activism. Happening in our community at that time. And this opened the door to, many Black projects and initiatives, which helped, some young Black people get their foot in the door, because, a lot of these doors were closed to us, were closed to our communities. Unemployment levels were really high, as you're talking about, we were how many times more likely to be unemployed despite having high levels of qualifications. The doors were closed to us. And so, as young people, enough always say, burn down Babylon, kick down some door, riot on the street, protest on the streets. And so, the local authorities and the government thought, okay, these Black people, better find some jobs for them, better set up some programs and some schemes. And so it's just really important to mention that had it not been for the political activism out there on the streets through organizations and groups, had it not been for the campaigning, had it not been for, those movements, a lot of those initiatives and programs that you speak of probably would never have surfaced, would never have come into existence. So, rise up to all of those who are out there protesting and understand the importance of being there on the street. Brother Kwame is showing us the other end, the outcome of that activism and some of the initiatives that happen. So rise up to everybody in the chat. We'll come to you in a little while. I hope you're enjoying these stories from Brother Kwame. I know I certainly am. Please continue, Brother Kwame.
Yeah, so, the 90s was what I would say as the golden era of Black activism and Black community organizing in the UK. Because like you said, there were many projects, many initiatives, that was evident within the African Caribbean community. And like I say, those initiatives and projects didn't just give it to us on the silver platter. We had to literally fight for those projects, those initiatives that became widespread within the African Caribbean community, particularly in the 1990s, early 2000s. And like you say, one of the linchpins for that was essentially the Stephen Lawrence case. That was really a watershed moment for this country, when a young, innocent African boy was brutally stabbed to death. Yeah, he died. So listen to this at home, right? This is a young Black boy minding his own business. He was stabbed to death just for being African. Now think about that now. Just let that sink in. Mind his own business, waiting for the bus, he was stabbed to death by 5 white youths just for being a black boy. Yeah. So those is what kind of triggered activism amongst a lot of us, many of us, who are now in our 50s, and even older than that, and probably some a bit younger than that, and like I say, this is like a golden era for the black community because it did result in a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives from which, did help the black community. And like I said, I was, recipient of one of those initiatives, which was the African Caribbean Development Agency in Nottingham. And that got funded from the Home Office amongst other sources. And we did a lot of work, within our community to look at issues, for example, even education. So at the time, and it still is the issue today, and I'll get some stats to prove what I'm saying a bit later on. But at the time in Nottingham, and Nottingham, even to this day, has some of the worst schools in the country, but particularly was evident in the early 2000s, whereby a lot of our black boys, Africans, African Caribbeans were underachieving in schools, yeah, and particularly in Nottingham. So as part of the work that we did at the African Caribbean Development Agency, we did a lot of research into that. And the long shot of that was that we were able to get the council to have a policy and a program whereby there was a policy called the Black Achievement Strategy. And that was put together by an elder, I don't know if he's still alive, called Eric Pemberton. Yeah, we worked with Eric Pemberton to put forward or to initiate what was called the Black Achievement Strategy. And that was evident in the early 2000s. And because of that strategy, that was tailor-made to tackle some of the pressing issues that African children have faced in schools in Nottingham. So even to this day, it's evident. But back in the day, back in the early 2000s, there was a report done by one of our sisters called Linda Apia. She's a Ghanaian, but she did a lot of research into how the local authority views black children. And one of those outcomes was that a lot of the white teachers, particularly those of a middle class background, come to teach in the schools in the inner city, so-called, and teach black children and have very, very low expectations of our children. Yeah.
You mentioned low expectations. That's the discussion that they're having in the chat right now, Brother Kwame. I mean, Brother Kwame Osei says, they told me I couldn't be a journalist, but I did listen to them and I did my own thing. They are so fearful when it comes to African people. I've had a few similar. One of my jobs was the homeless emergency unit right beside Hackney Town Hall in Mayor Street, Sister Afri Jamo. There's a couple on the same line. Sheriff S is saying that housing was always hard for our people to get into. Here in London, they had an organisation called Path that broke barriers for us in Wood Green in London. Kwame is also talking about one of his cousins who wanted to be an architect, but the racist teacher discriminated against him and his ambitions and said that he should be something else. That's how nasty they were. And as a result, every other brother has ended up being a musician or an athlete, and so that is the outcome of some of that. Gary is saying, oh, housing manager, that's progressive to hear. Yes, it is. Just goes to show you get the right, encouragement and motivation. And of course you can become a housing manager, Kwame Osei says, true career advisors should have been called destiny destroyers. I agree. I had a similar experience as well. I remember I was saying, I want to be a lawyer. They said to me, you don't want to be a lawyer. That's 7 years of studying. You'll be married with children by then. Think of doing something else. And that time, they just thought we should be sitting at the cashier desk in the local Tesco's or Sainsbury's or something. Yeah, I agree, Sheriff F. They should have been called destiny destroyers. They said they always encourage you to do manual, unskilled jobs and would write bad references for your college applications. I mean, these are the experiences, that we were having. And look, so many people in the chat are talking about the fact that they had these experiences as well. I'm scrolling through. Kwame says, what about when our brothers who have ambitions to become engineers and architects, and the racist educational system in this country say the only thing that they can be is musicians and athletes? Yes, indeed. And so, you just touched on that. And as I said, this is a conversation that was going on in here. Sherifa says, I didn't go to that school, but the reputation preceded her. And when I worked with children, she used to stress them out. She also taught Friends and was at that school for 4 years. So someone who was at the school for 4 years and stressing out the people and teachers, I'll scroll up and find, what that story is all about. That's right, Sister Shanice. My family from Jamaica to the UK had to sit at the back of the class because they were well ahead. So the teacher just left them. Wow. Philip, one of them, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Yes, indeed. Kwame, 48 years ago in London, when the racist National Front attacked our people who celebrated the West Indies beating England in the cricket at the Oval. Another incident that's at the forefront of the mind of one of our audience participants. So as you're hearing, Brother Kwame, a number of our audience participants are sharing incidences involving racism and their experience of racism growing up here in the UK. It's so important for us to share these stories because there's so many people from Africa, risking life and limb to come to Europe, thinking that, the white people are wonderful, like the ones that used to come to Africa and do the charitable things that you met along the way. And they show us such a lovely face in Africa, don't they? But you try go to their home.
Exactly.
You try go to their home. They come to your home and we welcome them with open arms and we treat them so wonderfully, so hospitably that they don't want to go back. And in some parts of Africa, they come and they stay. They don't go back home, like the 2 million who are in South Africa, go out there on holiday, love it so much and don't want to go back. And we
5 million.
5 million.
Yeah.
5 million.
Yeah.
So the real number is more like 5 million.
Yeah, 5 million.
Most of our African brothers and sisters can't even get a foot in the door. Wow. Brother Kwame, please continue with your
so I did that job and I really loved that job because it really exposed me to the community as well as what I was doing with brother to brother. So the research work that I did also gave me a lot of tools in terms of how to do research and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed the job because I went deep into the community, right into the heart of our community in Nottingham, able to talk to a lot of people, and that's where my first time I even met a lot of elders, because we even had a program about, and this is long before Windrush, long before Windrush. Chat to some of our elders talking about their experiences in Nottingham, and I, got at first hand, how a lot of our elders, fought in the so-called Second World War in particular in Nottingham. People like Eric Irons, and George Powell. Those are two that spring to mind, and they were part of the Jamaican Spitfire Squadron in the Battle of Britain. And I heard them telling me stories about how they fought courageously in that particular war between the Luftwaffe and the British Army, but in particular the Jamaican Spitfire Squadron. That was a separate wing of the British Armed Forces. And it was actually the Jamaican Spitfire Squadron, who actually defeated Hitler's Luftwaffe. And Hitler then, later said, right, he didn't know that Negroes could fly planes. Such was the potency of the Jamaican Spitfire Squadron, yeah? And I was very fortunate enough to speak to those two now ancestors, George Powell and Eric Hines. And wow, that stories from those two particularly really blew my mind and really exposed me to Africans in the Caribbean, because I knew my father was, my father fought in the Second World War. He was part of the West African Squadron, and he fought in Burma. So my father told me before he was an ancestor, he told me that story as well. So I knew that Africans from the continent fought in the Second European Tribal War, so-called Second World War. But I didn't know that many of our kith and kin from the Caribbean also fought in that war. It was not when I spoke to George Powell and Eric Irons from Jamaica that I knew that, wow, Jamaicans also played a prominent role, in the circle of Second World War as well. So yeah, I really, really learned a lot in my time as a researcher for the African Caribbean Development Agency. Now, unfortunately, that job came to an end in 2005, and that was due to a lot of funding issues, and they put the plug. And I understand why they put the plug, because a lot of various community organizations and initiatives will begin to empower our people, yeah, and really, really, give them not necessarily a place at the table, but beginning to address some of the inequalities back then that our people faced, and particularly in Nottingham, because like I said, Nottingham at the time was the 8th most deprived local authority in the country. So, a lot of money was put into Nottingham City to actually redress that. So, I really, really enjoyed my role there. So in 2005, I went back to Ghana. So I went back to Ghana in 2005. My intention was to sort of, settle for good. And whilst I was there, I got married and I have 2 children. And then, funny thing about Ghana, I applied for many jobs in Ghana. And then I found out that in Ghana, there's a lot of cronyism in Ghana. So it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I was applying for these jobs in Ghana. And because I didn't know anyone, I didn't, get a job. So basically, I was just, helping my family, doing these things, doing odd jobs and that kind of thing. But, reacquainting myself with my language, my culture, my tradition, as Nakana, as Asante, and I really enjoyed, the nearly 10 years I spent in Ghana. So, the reason why I came back was because of 2 things. But well, basically, one, that time, me and my wife had about 3 businesses. And around about that time, 2013, 14, there was a massive power outage issue in Ghana, which, quite funny enough, is still the same today. But back then, 2013 straight 2014, it was basically every day, every day, light up in Ghana, power outage in Ghana. And that destroyed my wife's salon business. And I also had a cold store, and I also had another business as well. And that kind of destroyed that as well. So essentially, I ran out of money. And basically, at the time, interest rates in Ghana was about 35%. So I told my wife that I'm not going to borrow at 35% and haven't got the means to pay it back. So that's to her that, I'll come back to Britain, get some money, send it back to you, and then, we can start about rebuilding the businesses. So since 2014, I've been here in the UK. And that's been also a weird experience as well, because coming back to the UK, the racism, the anti-black racism, particularly in the workplace, is more, for me, it's not even hidden now. These people are now boldened with their, with their anti-African bigotry, and it's not just the white people, Asian people as well also are very bigoted towards us. One company I worked for was a company called Dixon Car House in Loughborough, and which is outside Leicester. And that was in 2019, before the pandemic. And I was, living in Ghana, I was aware of the anti-African racism as far as Asian people are concerned, so-called Asian, so Indian, Pakistani, what have you. So I was kind of, familiar with that, and when I stayed in Ghana as well, I was familiar with that. But in the work setting, I wasn't familiar with that. So when I worked, in Loughborough, I saw at firsthand the sort of benign anti-African racism that Asians have towards us. They'll call you in names like Kalia or Sudra or Sidi. So these things are basically, these are the N-word in their languages, so whether it's Urdu or Hindi or in Punjabi. So Kalia is Punjabi, is made N-word in Punjabi, Kalia. Sudra is like the N-word in Hindi. And basically Sidi is basically, that's what they call us in Pakistan. So those are basically derogatory names that the Asian people give us. And so I was opposed to that kind of nonsense by them. But when I also take them on that, because I said, how can you have this caste system, right? And then you're in Africa. You're in Africa, you're in Ghana, you're in Kenya, you're in Tanzania, you're in Uganda, you're in Nigeria, you're doing business, right? And some of them even came from Malawi. In the particular days, obviously, like I said, Leicester, because Loughborough's not far from Leicester, and Leicester is like the HQ of the Asian community in Britain. Yeah, some of them came from Africa, so places like Malawi, Kenya, Uganda. Some of their parents came from these places. So I'm thinking, right, you are in Africa, right, doing business, right, and yet you want to call me? Isn't that kind of hypocrisy and double standards on your part? And they just shook their shoulders, you know. So that was the you know, sort of racism that I got from Asians. And me personally, I'm not really, you know, I don't really befriend Asians. I haven't got any Asian friends, I never have, I never will, because of this casteism that they've got. You know, this is an unspoken thing that, you know, a lot of our people think that Asians can't be racist towards us, but they can. And even one of their own, a journalist called Yasmin Alabai Brown, she wrote a column in the aftermath of a black teacher being stabbed in Bradford. So an Asian child stabbed an African teacher in Bradford. You can actually Google this, yeah. And she highlighted Yasmin Alabai Brown, who's a famous, well-renowned Asian commentator in this country. She said that incident highlighted the anti-African racism that Asians have towards us. Yeah. So, you know, and this is why for me it's sickening that we spend our money with these Asian people, whether Indian, Pakistani, Bengali, whatever, because they don't like us. If you and I, my sister, if you and I went to India right now, we'd be like vermin, we'd be like scum. In Pakistan, the so-called Sidi community, Siddi, Sidi, they look like you and I. They are treated like scum, like animals, right? And yet, these same people want to do business with us in England and Africa. We can't have that. So this is why, for me, why, you know, when it came working with Asians, why I didn't like it, but I did it because I was getting good money, and I don't befriend them, and I'm making my policy not to shop with any Asian person. So some of our people shop with Asians because it's so-called cheaper. Do you know why it's cheaper than the black shop? Because they've got the distribution, they control the warehouses that import the food into this country. This is why Mr. Singh, Mr. Patel, Mr. Akbar, Mr. Chowdhury can sell 3 yam for £1, or now it's probably £5. And this is why Mr. Blackman shop sells 1 yam for £8. Yeah, because of these disparities. Yeah, and this is why, for me personally, why I know of the shenanigans, because we had it here in Nottingham, whereby an Asian shopkeeper wanted to close down an African shopkeeper. So we know of the shenanigans and the skullduggery and the foul play that Asian shopkeepers play on our shopkeepers. This is why, me personally, I have a policy, I have a code to shop with my own people. If I can't get what I want from them, I go to the European, Tesco, what have you. But I shop primarily with my own people. How can an Asian man, how can I, as African, buy yam, cocoyam, plantain, kalu, spinach from an Asian man's shop and not buy that from my own people? And when we as the people do that, when we buy our yam, our cocoyam, our dashin, when we buy that from an Asian man, then we are doing our people and our community and our business community a great disservice. Yeah, we are giving the Asian money and we are robbing our own people of the money. So this is why, for me personally, right, particularly with my experience of Asians, right, in Ghana and also here as well, that I do not shop with Asians. I'm making my policy and my code of conduct, not shop with Asians. So that's the experience I had working with them, you know. And with white people, you know, it's the same thing as well. You know, they want to impose their values, their culture on you. And the classic one is the Christmas one. So I was working for a company one time, you know, and it was Christmas. And you know, Christmas, they have all this stupidness, right? You know, Fuddle, Secret Santa, and all that nonsense, right? And I said, Kwame, you know, we're doing this thing. Do you want to get involved? I said, no. And he says, why? I said, that's not my culture. I don't celebrate Christmas. I never have, I never will, right? I have my own culture and traditional African. Now, some of you Africans listen to this in Africa, right? Believe it or not, Christmas is not an African holiday. Christmas is a European holiday. Christmas has got nothing to do with us as Africans, and it's got nothing to do also with the birth of Christ. So if you Christians who are listening, if you can tell me where in the Bible do they say Jesus was born on December 25th, then tell me. I read the Bible, like I said, I was a Christian in Ghana. I went to Catholic church. I went to, I went to Christian school in Ghana, Morning Star in Accra. Yeah. I was a choir boy when I was in Ghana. So I went for that Christian border dash. Nowhere in the Bible do they state that Jesus, somebody called Jesus, was born on December 25th. Yeah. So basically I said, I don't get myself involved in that Christmas thing. Yeah. I respect you because it's your culture and tradition, but please respect me because it's not my culture and tradition. So I never got myself involved in that Secret Santa, kissing under the mistletoe, Christmas party, etc. And I remember two white girls in particular, right? Because they always want to crack on black men, and they always think that we like white women, right? You black men in the office, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because you get the white woman eyeing you up, and we know the eye is up, black men up, right? Because Christmas time, right? They want to get off with you, right? And so I had these two white girls, right, coming to me, right? Oh, Kwame, you coming to a Christmas party? I said, no, I've got responsibilities. Because they knew I'm married, and knew I got children, right? Even though they're not here, I said that they're here, right? So I said to them that, I've got responsibilities. They said, oh, Kwame, you've been there, I said, no, I'm not, because, I've never been to a Christmas party before. I'm not going to go now. And like I said, I've got a wife and family at home. So, that's my way in not integrating myself within their culture. And because of that, I get sometimes outside at work, particularly the last few years, I've been outside at work because I don't assimilate myself. I don't integrate myself into their culture, because they talk about, Netflix and that kind of thing. That's not my culture. They talk about the pop stars, Taylor Swift. I don't like Taylor Swift. I don't watch Harry Potter. It's not my thing. So they can't really engage a conversation with me because I'm not into these things. And because of that,
and a lot of our people, sorry to interrupt there. Yeah, a lot of our people in the workplace are actually pressured, aren't we, into kind of conforming to and adopting and embracing their holidays, their traditions, their crazy work practices, going around the pub after work for a drink, and another drink and another, and and like the Santa and the kissing under the mistletoe and all sorts. How far do we know these people, how far they're prepared to go after a drink or two, and they try and pull you in, and if you don't want to get in, it's like, oh, what's wrong with you then? Oh, it's funny, that one there. You're made to feel like the odd one. And it's like, the fact that you have a different culture, different traditional practices, or that you might not be into what they're into, it's like, just not respected, is it? It's as if, it's only their culture that's important. Exactly. And, you ought to be adopting our culture. Exactly. You don't have the right not to. So a lot of pressure in the workplace. And that sort of pressure has put a lot of strain on some of our people. Not everyone's strong enough to withstand, all of that sort of pressure. And people end up feeling stressed because, they become psychopathic because, at home they're one person, and then in the workplace they've got to be another person. And then, oh my gosh, yeah. So, yeah, it's a lot of mental stress, a lot of pressure. And as we know, stress is a killer. Yeah, and a lot of our people die early. A lot of our people suffer all kinds of sicknesses and illnesses that they're unable to get proper treatment for, and so there's a bit of a vicious cycle there. Work, very stressful for our people. You're stressed because you can't get a job and the bills are piling up around your ears, or you've got a job and they're stressing you in the job, maybe, they're holding you down, not recognizing you to promote you, and they're promoting their own people over you who maybe not half as good as you to do the job, or they're making you feel unwelcomed or incompetent, or they're ostracizing you. So there's all sorts of work dynamics at play in the workplace when you do get the job. And then outside of that, and not having a job, I mean, it's just hell, isn't it? Because you're still expected to pay all those bills, and the bills are not cheap over here. You know, you actually need at least 2 salaries just to survive in one household. One salary just about manages to cover the bills usually. And if you've got a mortgage, you definitely need 2 salaries. And then you're lucky if you've got enough money to get yourself back to work the next strong, you know. So it certainly isn't a bed of roses over here. Kwame, it's been absolutely phenomenal. We are 5 minutes away from the top of the hour. To everyone in the chat, you know, they've been with us throughout the journey, Brother Kwame. And I've been reading the comments, and it looks as though many of our people, you know, have had similar experiences to what you've been talking about.
I wasn't making it up
outside of the UK, you know, who are hearing these stories for the first time and who's reading the comments in the chat, you'll know that, you know, what Kwame is talking about has been like the general kind of experience for many of us as Africans. There's so much of what Kwame has said that I, you know, myself has experienced and can definitely, you know,
Can I just read some stats to give to people at home? Just see some stats about, you know, our condition, so that they can actually, you know, what I've said, I can actually back it up with some stats. And these are not my own stats, these are from their own people. Yeah, because if we did ours, maybe even worse. Yeah. So I'll just give about 5 of them. So one of them is that, and this is from the Royal College of Nursing, Imperial College London, that Black women, African women, are 4 to 5 times likely to die giving birth while pregnant.
Imagine, why should that be? You know, why? That is the big question, because, you know, a woman going into a hospital, whether she's Black or white, shouldn't make any difference. They should be able to deliver a Black baby as successfully as they are able to deliver a white baby. But for some odd reason, you know, when it comes to delivering a Black baby, that child or that mother is 4 to 5 times more likely to die. That is a very, very shocking state of affairs. Carry on, please, Brother Kwame, with your statistics.
So I know many Africans in the content listening will find that astonishing, but it's true. Yeah, Black women in Britain are 4 to 5 times likely to die giving birth. So child mortality, not just an issue in Africa, issue here in UK. Second one, now this is even more staggering. Black graduates earn up to £7,000 less than their white counterparts.
Imagine. Why, again, should that be? If you've got the same level of qualifications, why should you be earning, on average, £7,000 less per annum? That is a huge amount of money. Carry on, please.
Now, the third one is that Black children are more likely to be excluded from school by their white counterparts. In actual fact, in some places, it's about 5 times more likely to be excluded compared to white children.
Wow. 5 times more likely to be excluded. Again, why is that happening? You know, we've been talking about the racism, and we know it's more subtle now than it was back in the days when Kwame first came to the country. They would tell you straight, the Black this, you coon, you N-word, and da. But since the introduction of the Race Relations Act, you know, racism is a lot more subtle now. And they're not going to tell you that to your face, but their actions speak louder than words. Wow. Be mindful of that, parents. Your children are more likely to be excluded. Yes, Brother Kwame. Did you have 1 or 2 more stats for us?
So this is even a shocking one, right? Black children as young as 8 are more likely to be stripped and searched, or this probably stripped and searched. This is in school, not even by the police. This is in school. And we know there's a famous case in this country about child Q. I think that's about from 2022, while she was strip searched, naked. Listen, she was naked. Even her tampon, that's a search that. She was stripped naked to the bone. And this is a regular occurrence in schools in UK because of the anti-African racism that is so much evident in this country, in school.
Wow. These are the sorts of issues that, you know, we're having to fight here in the UK and to try and stop them happening. We're at the top of the hour now, Brother Kwame. I think you was just about to give us 1 more stat.
Yeah,
Go on, go ahead.
Yeah, so in London, yeah, black people are what? I think 10%, 30% of the population, but they're up to 10 times likely to be stopped in search by the Met
Oh,
Police and not even being charged.
look at that. 10
And-
times
yeah,
more likely to be stopped and searched. And obviously, you know, if you've been stopped 2, 3, 4 times, by the fourth, fifth time, you're going to be like fed up. And you're
mhm,
going to like, what's going on here? And then the police officer will be like, oh, got a bit of an attitude, are you? Have you? Hands behind your back, we're taking you in. It's like, what for, what for? Oh, you answer me back, are you? And suddenly that young black person has got a criminal record
yeah, yeah.
in some case slapped on the. I mean, the conversation with you, Brother Kwame, you know, thank you so much for sharing your life testimony and your experience of life here in Britain as someone from the continent, the motherland, who came here thinking, you know, England was this wonderful, hospitable nation that was going to embrace you with open arms. Wow, what a shock you got. You got what we call the black treatment.
Indeed.
And a lot of our people get the black treatment. Not everyone's able to cope. And so it does put a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on our people. And a lot of people in the chat was talking about having similar experiences here in the UK. So, you know, it's not the exception. It was more like the norm for us as a people. To everyone who has stayed with us this evening, thank you so, so much. You know, so many wonderful comments in the chat. You know, rise up, Sister Betty is in the house and says, because words do not what because world does not love us, need to love and do for ourselves. Yes, yes, we absolutely do need to do for ourselves. Kwame Osei, for your post, thank you so, so much. To everyone that's been posting. Bossman, good to see you in the house as well. You know, Sister Afrijamo, to everybody who has been commenting in the chat. We thank you so, so much. Brother Kwame, it's been a privilege and an honor. You know, someone in the chat said, oh, Kwame Osei, I hear you all the time on Galaxy. You don't look anything like how I imagined. I think someone did say that in the chat somewhere. So, yeah, some family members recognize your voice from the Big G Galaxy. Yeah. The only de-brainwashing station. Thank you so much for tuning in, family. All being well, we will be back next strong with another wonderful guest who will be sharing their story with you about their journey and their experience of life being black in Britain. Sister Shanice, out of here for now.